BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today This Week podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this edition, has the National Food Strategy for England been watered down?
There is no mention at all of a white paper. Sources we've been speaking to suggest that has happened as a direct result of intervention from Number 10.
The Welsh Government announces its new sustainable farming scheme. A missed opportunity?
It sounds like a voluntary approach. We need to see how this scheme is going to help farmers deliver on climate and nature commitments.
We hear from the Welsh Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs on what's being described as a once-in-a-generation event.
We're working with farmers and putting the right financial incentives in place. It's a win-win.
But first, if you have been feasting on the abundant supplies of strawberries and raspberries in the shops just now, you will be all too aware that it's been a bumper year for soft fruit. In fact, it's peak season just now. The blueberry is a relative newcomer to the UK, but it's been a staple in our shopping baskets for more than a decade. Unlike other soft fruit, though, none of the varieties on offer here have been bred specifically for UK growing conditions. But as Nancy Nicholson now reports, that is all set to change.
OK, so I'll just take you into this advanced tunnel here and you'll be able to see the selection that we're really excited about.
I'm following Susan McCallum, a plant breeder, through the polytunnels, the noisy polytunnels. The wind's quite strong today here at the James Hutton Institute campus in Dundee. It's a centre that's internationally renowned for breeding blackcurrants and raspberries in particular. But Susan, this is quite a momentous day because you're just about to reveal the first UK-bred blueberry.
Yes, it's very exciting indeed. Now, this plant has been 10 years in the making, so you can tell how excited we are now that we're able to finally release it. It's been a labour of love. We've had a lot of evaluations. We've had thousands of seedlings that we've had to trawl through to find the best of the best, and so far, this is it.
It's a beautiful pale green. It's a shrub. It's got some berries on it, not ripe yet, green with a kind of hint of soft lilac. It doesn't look too different from all the other hundreds in this polytunnel. What makes it special?
Well, what makes it special is it's the flavour. This plant in particular has got a fantastic yield. It's got a nice crunch to it, so it's really juicy, but it's not mushy, and the flavour is just fantastic.
The berries are really big, aren't they?
They are, absolutely, which is, again, it's great for the growers as well because it's economic to pick, it fills the punnet nicely, and the fruit just looks fantastic in the punnet.
So how many different crosses have you rejected in favour of this one?
Oh, wow. Well, in the last 10 years, I've made over 350 unique crosses, and from each and every one of those crosses, I evaluate around 200 seedlings from every cross. So I have got rid of thousands and thousands to get to this one.
Do you eat them? Do you taste them all?
I do. I absolutely do. It's the best.
So healthy.
But only for a short period of the year I'm healthy. I mean, we've got a fantastic team as well, so it's not just my palate, because I like something a bit acidic, but this has got such a nice balance of the sugars and just a mild acid. It just makes it really nice to eat.
And the reason for growing a UK blueberry rather than just using the ones we currently have is what?
Blueberries themselves are native to North America, and they were domesticated there in the early 20th century. Our climate is so different, and a lot of these varieties, they're just not optimum for our growing conditions. Our wind, for example.
Which is what we're hearing in the background, the tunnel.
Exactly. So what we've really needed to do is just look specifically for something that's perfect for our climate, for our mild winters, our mild summers, our wind, but it can be quite wet. And the growing season in Scotland is just perfect for these blueberries.
Farmers have been encouraged to grow the crop to meet demand, but cheaper imports have meant prices were unviable for many producers and they've pulled out. It's great to have this, but is it too late?
No, I don't think so. No grower wants to leave the industry, but unfortunately the economics and the cost of production is making it very difficult. But I think there is hope at the other side because the consumer demand's there, the quality of local growing is so much better than imports that I think consumers will demand that we get the high quality that we can grow.
It's too early to taste it. It's still, a few weeks away from from being ripe?
Yeah, probably a good 3 weeks away from being ripe, I would say, yeah.
Right, but Susan, can we have the world exclusive here on Farming Today? Can you tell me the name of this blueberry?
I can indeed. Well, for the last 10 years, it's been called by the breeder's number, which is 142232, but once it gets its licence, proposed name is Highland Charm.
Highland Charm. There you go, a world exclusive on Farming Today from our reporter Nancy Nicholson. Now, after 7 years of deliberating, the Welsh Government has unveiled the future for the country's farmers with its sustainable farming scheme. Under old EU rules, as regular listeners to this programme will know, British farmers received support payments based on the amount of land they had. Agriculture is devolved, so since Brexit, individual new schemes have been devised in all 4 nations. The old-style payments are all but being phased out by next year in England, but retained to some extent in Scotland and Northern Ireland. The new support schemes broadly reward farmers for environmental work, things like habitat restoration, carbon capture and flood alleviation. In Wales, farmers are being encouraged to take part in a new scheme which will pay them for sustainable food production and protecting the environment. Now, the process has been far from an easy one for the Welsh Government. As we reported at the time, last year saw tractor protests up and down the country in reaction to the new proposals, culminating in thousands of farmers leaving their fields and farmsteads to protest outside the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament in Cardiff Bay. One of their main concerns was the government's plan that to continue to receive payments, they'd have to have 10% of their farm covered in trees.
I haven't worked this land for people to come here and plant trees. We've worked our hands to the bone to get that land to produce food. It's our land, and we produce the food.
We just feel like the ministers are just not listening and just don't seem to understand what we're trying to do. The new proposed SFS scheme could detriment Welsh farming.
What they want to implement, it's a slow death. It's a strangulation of Welsh farms.
My father suffered a stroke at 55 through the strains of farming, and he would literally be turning in his grave today at the legislations that today's farmers have to face.
I think the public are waking up to realising if these things go ahead and farmers keep going out of business at the rate they are, their food is going to be coming from all corners of the world.
Well, those farmers were protesting in Cardiff back in 2024. Since then, there's been a consultation and amendments to the proposals. And this week, the details of the scheme have been set out. And notably, with the controversial 10% tree cover requirement scrapped. Any farmer not joining the new sustainable farming scheme will see their payment drop by 40% next year, which is when it's being introduced. And those who remain outside the new system will face a 60% cut in 2027. Industry leaders have described the proposals as a once-in-a-generation event. Ministers say it's a scheme that recognises farming's vital role in Welsh communities while meeting environmental responsibilities. Stefan Messenger, BBC Wales Environment correspondent, explains the details.
Debate over the years has focused on how to make this scheme accessible, workable for farmers while ambitious enough to deliver against Wales's environmental goals. And the government has already made some pretty major concessions, such as scrapping a requirement for farmers to have 10% tree cover to qualify for funding after widespread farmer protests in 2024. There'll be 3 layers or tiers of funding, a universal layer that's sort of like an entry-level payment. And in order to access this, farms have to sign up to 12 actions or obligations. They range from soil health planning and management of wildlife habitat to continuous professional development, online courses on sustainable farming. This layer also includes a social value payment, which aims to recognise what are described as the wider benefits that sustainable agriculture provides to society, from food production to sustaining rural communities, the Welsh language and so on. And that's something farmers have fought hard to include. There'll then be an optional layer that offers top-up funding for more ambitious environmental work, including tree planting, peatland restoration and so on. And finally, a collaborative layer for farms working together on landscape-scale projects.
That's BBC Wales environment correspondent Stefan Messenger. One of the main goals for the Sustainable Farming Scheme is to improve biodiversity and habitats for wildlife, whilst encouraging sustainable farming methods. But conservationists have criticised the scheme's lack of ambition. Afon Williams is head of land and sea policy at RSPB Wales.
Going by what we've seen, it's pretty kind of low-hanging fruit. This is just bringing farmers into the scheme, getting them to recognise the habitats they've got, and hopefully to start managing the existing habitats in a more favourable way. But that in itself, unfortunately, won't really come close to really getting to grips with restoring nature, addressing kind of the nature emergency. It's a start, but the scheme needs to go an awful lot further.
So some environmental groups have described this as a missed opportunity. Would you say that?
I think it's a start. We can see where government is coming from. It needs to be a popular scheme. What's disappointing is we haven't seen the upper layers yet, so we don't know how the scheme is going to work. And we don't have an indication of how effective those will be yet. So whether it's going to be a missed opportunity or not, we don't know. I mean, potentially yes, but we need to make sure those upper layers work. We don't yet know how effective the scheme is going to be at halting the loss of nature, restoring it. We haven't seen the detail or the critical elements yet.
There is one point, I think, that's quite clear, that the government has dropped that 10% tree cover, but it has said that farmers must have 10% habitat on their farms. What do you make of that change?
The decision to drop the 10% tree target, well, that's been made. What's vital now is that Welsh Government works with the farming sector to come up with an alternative that will ensure farming plays its fair part in meeting climate change commitments and targets. We don't see that yet. We can see that government are wanting to go down a much more, it sounds like a voluntary approach. The reality is, without help, farming set to become kind of the largest emitter of greenhouse gases by mid-decade, next decade. So there has to be a plan to help farming move away from that. The scheme's an important part of that, but we're not seeing how that's going to happen. So that these areas of concerns, as I say, it's a good start, but we need to see how this scheme is going to help farmers deliver on climate and nature commitments.
Afon Williams from RSPB Wales. The Welsh Government has committed to the same budget on the universal layer as this year's budget for basic payment scheme farm payments, which is £238 million. And the total spend on all three layers next year will be £340 million. Most farmers in Wales rely on these payments. An average of 67% of Welsh farm incomes came from subsidies in 2020 to 2021. And if you Cymru was involved in the negotiations about the new system, President Aled Jones spoke to Anna Hill.
The scheme has to work. We have no other options. We are still awaiting an impact assessment. I hope, as and when that impact assessment is available, that we will see some modifications to safeguard that there is no financial damage to the rest of the industry. So cautious optimism would be one word, and hoping that we can have further changes that might be required as well.
I mean, are you happy with it?
The structure of the scheme is absolutely right. Having a universal layer where all farmers are able to participate, and I hope that's the significance of getting as many farmers as possible, but they've got to, take the barriers away. And then having additional elements in the optional collaborative is the right design. And we've always said that, and we need to get it to work properly.
Your response has been critical of the 60% fall in BPS payments from next year. But surely won't farmers be able to recoup that loss by taking up these SFS schemes?
Back in November, the farmers were given the option by Welsh Government, stating very clearly that they did not wish farmers to be facing a cliff edge on funding, and they wanted to make sure that the transition from BPS to the SFS was as smooth as possible to give farmers the confidence in that transition from the two schemes. So an equal step reduction was presented to farmers. They will now feel that they are being pushed, coerced, whatever, into signing up to the scheme right from the first year, 2026. And a little bit of concern, particularly as all the scheme details are not yet available.
The previous stipulation of 10% tree cover has been dropped, hasn't it? But there is a 10% habitat commitment. How do you feel about that?
Well, it was a sensible decision to drop the 10% mandatory tree requirements because, it wouldn't work for many, many farms. The habitat, what has been granted is more flexibility on what could actually be provided in terms of creating temporary habitat.
NFU Cymru President Aled Jones. Well, as we heard, the union has criticised the rapid fall in BPS payments for farmers who don't join the new scheme. Anna put these concerns to Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Hugh Iranka-Davies.
I do appreciate the fact that the BPS taper is faster than perhaps originally envisaged, but actually we're 12 months further down the line now as well. So if we'd have started the scheme a year ago, we would have been doing that 40% taper by now anyway. But the important thing here is we are genuinely trying to encourage farmers as well to transition from the BPS, which will in effect be a legacy scheme, into the SFS, which is for now and for the future. And we've also made sure that some of the payments within, for example, the optional layer are more generous in the first 3 years, specifically to encourage people to get into the scheme early and to draw down those payments.
Can you guarantee, though, that the SFS payments will be equivalent to the BPS payments if farmers do take it up on the universal layer?
So we've guaranteed that the SFS and the transition from BPS to SFS is that quantum of funding that we said we would do, and we have. Those entrants who actually come into it, they've got that certainty of that stability in the universal layer of the scheme. As importantly, they'll be able to access, when they enter the scheme, the optional and collaborative layers as well. So some of the calculations that individual farmers will have to do, we can help with. We're going to be providing from next week onwards something of a ready reckoner so that farmers will be able to calculate what this will mean for them on their individual farm.
The budget will be decided annually. Why are you doing that? That doesn't give confidence to farmers, does it?
It's precisely the same as we've done for the last several years since we've left the EU. It's been an annual budget settlement, not dissimilar to what they do in other governments as well. The great thing about this scheme is we've devised it, though, on a whole farm basis. And what that means is we're looking at really productive farms. We're looking at innovation within farms. We're looking at high animal welfare standards and food security and food delivery. But we're also looking at climate and nature as well. That's the strongest possible argument.
Yeah, well, on that point, WWF Cymru call this a missed opportunity for conservation. RSPB says it's sustainable in name only.
Well, we disagree, because if you look at even on the universal level, for the first time ever, any farmer who enters this scheme, there will be 10% habitat managed for nature and for biodiversity. There are elements within it to do with the quality, not just the quantity of hedgerows within the universal layer. There is numbers of those within the universal layer alone. But the real win for nature and for biodiversity and for climate resilience comes within the optional and collaborative layers. That's why we've designed this to be accessible to all farmers as possible, to encourage farmers to come in, including the steeper taper, by the way, into the universal layer, but then to draw down the additional funds that we're...
Aren't you forcing them into it rather than encouraging them?
No, we're working with farmers and putting the right financial incentives in place, because those financial incentives are also then within the optional and collaborative additional funding streams to do other great things, such as working together on landscape scale. So there will be additional options and collaborative elements that farmers can also draw down to give them more business resilience as well. So it's a win-win.
Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs in Wales, Hugh Iranka-Davies. And no doubt we'll be hearing more reaction to the new sustainable farming scheme later this week, because we're heading to the Royal Welsh Show in Builth Wells. Charlotte will be there presenting Farming Today, and also a special panel discussion programme with young farmers to listen out for soon. Now, you might just have missed this because it wasn't launched with a huge fanfare, but the government published its food strategy for England this week. It aims to create what it calls a good food cycle, a framework to make food production more sustainable, radically overhaul our relationship with food and prepare farmers and food producers for future challenges. The National Farmers Union has welcomed the document, though it says it needs to be backed up by joined up and pragmatic policy measures. But there are concerns that the strategy has been watered down and that a food white paper expected in the spring has been dropped. Ian Quinn from The Grocer magazine has been following the story.
We've been waiting for several months now to see what Labour would do with this. They announced back in December that they were going to do a new food policy. This follows the policy that Henry Dimbleby did for the previous government back in 21. Finally, this week, we got the list of 10 policy objectives that were published this week.
And how are these new plans, the new objectives in this new government food strategy different to what had gone before then? I mean, is there anything radically different?
Not really, no. I mean, it's very much the sort of things that you would have expected in policies that are aimed at tackling the obesity crisis. With it being a Labour government, as we would have expected, there's a heavy emphasis on affordability of food and making healthy food more available to families. There's also mention of improving supply chain resilience and helping create jobs and increase skills in the sector.
I mean, we heard that people thought it was a bit thin on detail. What's the reaction been?
That has been the reaction generally, that it's very scant on the details. In some ways, that was to be expected, but bearing in mind the advisory group that was set up to oversee this was only launched in March. I mean, it would have been surprising if they'd have been too far down the road with firm policies. However, this is perhaps even more top level than people were hoping. There isn't really anything in there by way of firm policies, and some of the policies that perhaps we might have expected to see in this strategy DEFRA has found itself somewhat gazumped by the Department of Health, which announced plans on the obesity side earlier this month.
Yeah, I mean, there had been plans for a food white paper next year, but those seem to have disappeared. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, that's, very interesting. We've seen a draft of this document, which was very different and included plans for a food white paper, which was due to have come out next year. Obviously, a white paper suggests that the government is then committing to come up with policies and legislation to back up its proposals. In the final document this week, there is no mention at all of a white paper. It's disappeared, and sources we've been speaking to suggest that has happened as a direct result of intervention from Number 10.
Really? Why is Number 10 intervening?
It's a good question. The speculation is that they're loathed to bring in regulation because of the risks, both in terms of it potentially impacting on food prices and could be strongly resisted by the food industry. But also, it's not just that, it's also any big policy that the food strategy comes up with that requires substantial government investment, obviously is something that the Treasury would have to bankroll. Now, everyone knows the situation that the Chancellor's in at the moment, so it does appear that this perhaps has fallen victim to that situation.
I mean, the DEFRA Minister, Daniel Zeichner, says that these are ambitious plans to change our relationship with food and what we eat. And, I mean, it does involve different government departments like health and employment all working together. It's a hugely complex area. Do you think they're to be applauded for trying to look at this on a much deeper level?
Yeah, I think that there's been quite a lot of praise on him. He seems to have taken a very keen interest in this, and he does seem to understand the nature of the challenge. It's like herding cats, obviously, to get cross-government support, especially for such objectives that they're setting out here. But it doesn't look at this stage anyway that this is to do with DEFRA incompetence. It looks more like it's been difficult to get political buy-in. It sounds like DEFRA wanted to go further.
That's Ian Quinn from The Grocer. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs told us This government is committed to developing a food strategy where everyone stands to benefit from a nutritious, sustainable and resilient food system. The Good Food Cycle represents a major milestone in developing a food system that is fit for the future. No decisions have been made on the format of any future publications. And that's all from us today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.